My name is Amara Thompson, and I'm 29 years old. Tonight, I sit in what used to be our apartment, a space once filled with the promise of forever. The walls, now stripped bare, echo the silence of broken dreams. Tomorrow, this apartment will no longer be mine, and neither will Malik. A few hours ago, my fiancé looked me square in the eye and dropped the bomb. We need to cancel the wedding. I found someone better. His tone was cold, detached, like he was telling me the weather forecast. No hint of remorse, no sign of regret. He was wearing the jacket I'd bought him for his birthday last year, and that cologne, the one he saved for special occasions, poured heavily on his skin. He wanted to seem untouchable. But here's the part he didn't see coming. I didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't scream. Instead, I smiled, faint but deliberate, and said, "Already done." His face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I canceled everything last week," I replied, calm and steady. "The venue, the catering, the photographer. I got most of the deposits back, too." I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "And, before you ask, your stuff's already packed up. 3 boxes with your name on it, waiting for you in the garage." For the first time in months, I saw him falter. His voice cracked. "You packed my stuff?" I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed.
Yep.
"On Tuesday, while you were out playing book club," I made air quotes with my fingers. "I packed it all up. You're welcome to pick it up anytime." Malik blinked, stunned, like the script he'd written in his head had been torn to pieces. In his version, he was the one delivering the blow, the cruel twist. He expected me to crumble, to beg him not to leave. Instead, he was watching his own empire of lies collapse. What he didn't realize was that I had already seen this coming for months. The late nights, the phone flipped down every time I entered the room, the password changes. He thought I was too naive, too stupid to notice. But I wasn't. I had already read the texts. The ones he'd carelessly left open on his phone. The ones from Maya, the woman he'd been seeing behind my back. 3 months of silent suffering turned into 3 months of careful planning. I wasn't preparing for heartbreak. I was preparing for freedom. Please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I watched Malik's face shift through every emotion, confusion, frustration, then panic. For the first time in months, I saw a man who wasn't in control. He didn't know how to react to this. I wasn't playing his game anymore. "Wait a minute," he stammered, trying to regain some footing. "You really think I'm just going to walk out of here like this?" I didn't answer him immediately. I let the silence hang heavy between us. I could almost feel him unraveling, his carefully constructed image of control slipping through his fingers. His arrogance was his weapon, but it wasn't enough to hold me down anymore. Finally, he spoke again, more desperate this time. "This isn't right, Amara. You're just—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "You think you're some kind of victim here? You're not, okay? You're the one who's been playing games, acting like everything was fine when it wasn't." The nerve of him. For years, I'd been the one walking on eggshells, trying to hold us together while he ran around, hiding things behind my back. I wasn't about to let him flip the script. "Funny," I said, "because I didn't see you playing any victim card when you were with Maya." His eyes widened, and his jaw clenched. You know about that," he whispered. I smiled sweetly. "I do now." The fury in his eyes flared up, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. He'd push me to the edge. Now he'd see just how deep the cut went. Malik leaned forward, a sneer twisting his lips. "You think you've won? You really think you can just take everything from me?" I met his gaze. "I'm not taking anything. I'm just taking back what you tried to steal." The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, it felt like everything in that room was suspended. The tension between us was suffocating. Malik wanted to believe that I'd collapse, beg him to stay, fall to my knees, but the woman sitting across from him wasn't the same one he'd deceived for all those years. "Where's Maya now, huh?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "What's she going to do when she realizes you're just another man with a pocket full of lies and a lack of integrity?" He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "Don't talk about her. You have no idea."
About what?
I interrupted, standing too. About her thinking she's special? About how you told her everything you told me. I get it, Malik. You have a pattern. His fists clenched. You don't know anything about my life with her. I know enough, I said, crossing the room and locking eyes with him. Enough to know that she's your escape plan. But you're forgetting something crucial. She's just like you. And that's your downfall. His face turned red. He was losing control, and I could see the anger and shame rising in him. You can't win, Amara, he spat. You're just one woman. You can't hurt me the way I can hurt you. I laughed. A bitter, dark sound that seemed to hang in the space between us. You're already hurting yourself, Malik. I'm just watching the show. He looked at me, stunned, like I had somehow become an enigma he couldn't solve. You think you've got me figured out? You think this is some kind of game? His voice was rising, but I stayed steady, not giving an inch. I think you've been playing a game with me, Malik, I said coldly. And I'm done being your pawn. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he tried to reframe the situation in his favor. But there was no saving this. The walls were closing in on him, and I was the one who had set the trap, even though he hadn't seen it coming. You think you can control everything? You think I'm just gonna back down because you're some broken-hearted woman? Malik growled, his frustration now boiling into rage. You don't know how far I'm willing to go, Amara. You don't know what I'll do to make you regret this. I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. Go ahead. Do your worst. I already know your moves. You've played all your cards. Now it's my turn. I could see his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to turn the tables, but nothing could help him now. He was already too deep in his lies. I wasn't going to let him drag me back into the wreckage of this relationship. Malik took a step back, his face hardening. You really think you've got it all figured out, huh? He shook his head, his voice filled with scorn. You think you've won, but you're just setting yourself up for a bigger fall. You'll see. I met his gaze with a calm I hadn't felt in months.
No, Malik.
I'm not falling. You are. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the years of me trying to make this work while he was out chasing someone else's love, someone else's validation. I had invested my heart in a man who had no idea what loyalty or love really meant. His hands balled into fists at his sides. You're sick, you know that? You're twisted. You're playing with fire. I didn't flinch. You want to talk about fire? You started this blaze, Malik. You and your lies. I'm just letting it burn. His gaze flickered, confusion and anger battling for control. He was teetering on the edge of losing everything, his pride, his future with Maya, and any hope of maintaining some semblance of dignity. But none of it mattered. I had already won. Malik's eyes narrowed, as though he was searching for an angle, a way out. You're not going to get away with this, Amara. I'm not done with you. I gave him a long, assessing look, trying to gauge if he was bluffing or truly spiraling. There was something off in the way his hands shook, a tell I hadn't noticed before. He wasn't the man I had known. The confident, cocky facade he had worn for so long was now cracked wide open, revealing the insecurity beneath. He was scared. Malik, listen to me. My voice was calm, almost too calm.
This isn't about me.
It never was. You're the one who made this decision. You're the one who betrayed us. You think this is just going to go away? He spat, his voice raw. You're making a huge mistake. I'll make you regret this. I stood, slowly walking toward him, my expression unwavering. You don't have the power to make me regret anything. Not anymore. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for who you really are sooner. I could almost hear his heart beat faster, the panic starting to creep in. Malik wasn't used to being the one who had no control, and it was driving him mad. I watched him try to steady himself, his posture stiffening, as though to regain some semblance of the man he used to be. But it was too late. The cracks were too deep now, and I wasn't the one holding the hammer anymore. He took a breath, his voice thick with false confidence. This is your last chance, Amara. You can still walk away from this. I'm willing to forget all of this if you just come back to me. I shook my head, feeling a sense of relief flood through me.
No.
I'm not walking away from anything, Malik. I'm walking into my future. Without you. His eyes darkened, the tension in the air thickening. You'll regret this, he repeated, his words a warning, but there was no conviction behind them. He was unraveling, and I was finally free. He turned, walking toward the door. We're not done, he muttered under his breath. But I knew better. I watched him try to steady himself, his posture stiffening, as though to regain some semblance of the man he used to be. But it was too late. The cracks were too deep now. And I wasn't the one holding the hammer anymore. He took a breath, his voice thick with false confidence. This is your last chance, Amara. You can still walk away from this. I'm willing to forget all of this if you just come back to me. I shook my head, feeling a sense of relief flood through me.
No.
I'm not walking away from anything, Malik. I'm walking into my future. Without you. His eyes darkened, the tension in the air thickening. You'll regret this, he repeated, his words a warning, but there was no conviction behind them. He was unraveling, and I was finally free. He turned, walking toward the door. We're not done, he muttered under his breath. But I knew better. I watched Malik walk to the door, his steps heavy, almost as if he was trying to convince himself he still had control. But I knew better. He was done. I had never seen someone so exposed, so raw. The man I once thought I loved was slipping through my fingers, and it wasn't because of me. He was drowning in his own lies. As he reached the door, he paused, glancing back at me. You really think you're going to be happy without me?
Huh?
You think you're going to find someone who actually cares about you? His voice was low, a dangerous edge creeping into his tone. I stood there, arms crossed, unfazed. I already found someone who cares. And it's me. The silence that followed felt like a wave crashing over us. Malik's eyes flickered with something close to anger, but there was a flicker of fear, too. It didn't matter. I had nothing left to prove. I'll see you again, he muttered, stepping through the door and slamming it behind him. But it didn't feel final. I knew deep down he'd come back, and when he did, it would be to beg for something, anything, that could put him back on top. But I wasn't about to let that happen. The days after Malik left felt like a surreal blur. It was a mix of relief and raw vulnerability. The apartment, though stripped of its old life, felt like a breath of fresh air. There was something freeing about the emptiness, the quiet, and the absence of someone who had once been my everything. I moved quickly, transferring money, canceling utilities, doing whatever it took to untangle myself from the mess he'd left behind. I hadn't yet unpacked my boxes in my new place, but the weight that had been lifted was more significant than any material possession. But there was still that lingering fear in my chest, the fear that Malik wasn't done. The fear that he would somehow find a way to drag me back into his world. I had to be careful. I knew him better than anyone, and one thing I'd learned was that his ego was the one thing that could drive him to do anything. 2 days later, the phone rang. Amara. The voice on the other end was tight, familiar. It was my old friend, Kira. You need to know something. I immediately felt my stomach drop. Kira's voice was filled with urgency. Malik's not just sitting there sulking, Amara.
He's planning something.
He's telling everyone that you're crazy, that you've been stalking him, that you've somehow manipulated him into this. He's got people in your old circle believing him. I ran a hand over my face, feeling a headache start to form. Of course he is. He's always been good at twisting the narrative. But he won't get away with it. You need to be careful. I'm just warning you, because I've heard from a few people that he's spreading some serious lies. He's not just playing the victim. He's trying to make you the villain. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not worried about people who can't see the truth. If they believe his lies, then they're not my people anyway. But still, my heart was heavy. Malik had always been good at creating chaos. And chaos was something I couldn't afford. I'd planned for this. I had to stick to the script. The next few days were a whirlwind. Emails, texts, phone calls. Each one from someone who had somehow been sucked into Malik's web of lies. It didn't surprise me, but it was exhausting. One text caught my attention. Did you really tell Malik that you loved him, but would only be happy if he changed? Is that why he's gone, Amara? It was from Rachel, another of our mutual friends. I stared at it for a long moment, weighing my response. I knew how Malik worked. He was masterful at making himself the martyr while throwing his victims into the fire. You can believe whatever you want, Rachel. But the truth is, he's the one who didn't believe in us. He's the one who left. I just took back what was always mine. I sent the message and set my phone down. I didn't care about convincing anyone who couldn't see past Malik's smoke and mirrors. I was done. But as the day wore on, I realized something important. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I was free. I had the upper hand, and Malik wasn't the only one who could play the game. It wasn't long before Malik's next move came. Late one evening, I received a voicemail from my lawyer, Richard. Amara, I don't want to alarm you, but Malik has filed for emotional damages. He's claiming you forced him into this breakup, that you manipulated him to the point where he's emotionally wrecked. He's also trying to claim his share of the wedding refund. I froze, my hand tightening around the phone. Is he serious? I muttered aloud. Richard's voice continued. He's not getting anywhere with this, but I wanted to let you know. The lawyer he hired is just as ridiculous as the case. Don't worry, we've got it handled. But you should prepare for the media blitz. Media blitz? I scoffed. Malik would stop at nothing to maintain his facade. I knew he was sinking fast, and this was just another attempt to get people on his side. He had a whole performance to give, and the last thing I was going to do was play along. I hung up, a small smile forming on my lips. If he wanted a fight, I would give him one. The next few days were a blur. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw another email or text from Malik, each one more desperate than the last. It was as if he couldn't comprehend that I was serious about leaving him behind. His texts ranged from angry accusations to attempts at sweet-talking me back into his life. But I knew better now. Malik's words were just noise, and his promises meant nothing. I had moved on emotionally before I even left that apartment. The truth was out, and no matter how hard he tried to twist the story, I had nothing to feel guilty about. The guilt I had been carrying for months, the guilt of wondering if I had missed the signs, of not trusting my instincts, was gone. But the pressure was mounting. Word had started to spread. Our mutual friends were caught in the crossfire. They wanted to know who was right, who was lying. I received messages asking for clarification, but I didn't engage. If they couldn't see through Malik's facade, then they weren't the people I needed in my life. It was exhausting, but it was also freeing. The truth was coming out, and nothing Malik could say would change that. I was no longer the one on trial. The next few weeks were full of strange quiet, the kind that's unsettling after a storm. Malik's antics slowed, but not completely. I found out he was still trying to manipulate the situation, spreading his version of the story to anyone who would listen. The lies he told became more elaborate, more desperate. But the damage was done. The people who mattered to me saw through his act. One afternoon, my lawyer, Richard, called with news that made my stomach churn. Malik had filed a lawsuit for emotional damages, claiming I was the one who had manipulated him into ending things. He also argued that he was entitled to the wedding venue refund, which he had already tried to claim from the venue. Richard laughed it off, saying it was all a joke in legal terms, but still, the frustration of it all set in. Amara, don't worry. He's just playing a game, Richard reassured me. This is all he's got left, trying to drag you back into his world. Don't let it work. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was prepared for this. If Malik wanted to drag me through the mud, he would. But I wouldn't go down easily. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. It felt like everything was slipping into place, piece by piece. The day Malik's financial world collapsed was the day I realized he had no more power over me. Theodore, Malik's father, had finally stepped in. I had always known Theodore didn't approve of Malik's actions, but I never expected him to do something this drastic. Amara, Theodore said over the phone one morning, his voice steady, I've closed off Malik's access to the account he's been using. He won't be able to touch a dime, not until he gets his life together. I blinked in surprise. You're serious? I'm not standing by while he digs his own grave. If he wants to act like a child, then he'll get treated like one. The sense of support from Theodore hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. He had taken a stand, not just for me, but against the chaos Malik had caused. I had always respected Theodore, but in that moment, I realized how deeply he cared about me. As I sat there processing the news, I felt the weight of Malik's manipulations crumble. I wasn't alone anymore. The people who had truly seen me for who I was, who had been by my side from the beginning, had finally taken action. Malik, of course, didn't take this well. His sense of entitlement seemed to know no bounds, and the fallout from his financial situation sent him into a frenzy. Desperation clawed at him. He continued to send me increasingly venomous texts, trying to drag me back into his web. Each message was more ridiculous than the last. He claimed I had stolen from him, that I was the one trying to ruin his life. But I had nothing to steal. He had already taken everything that mattered. I ignored him. His games didn't work anymore. Each time he tried to gaslight me, I just smiled, knowing he was losing his grip. The truth was finally louder than his lies. One day, a mutual acquaintance called me. "Amara," she said hesitantly, "Malik's really going off the rails. He's telling everyone that you're the one who forced him into this breakup, that you manipulated him. He's spreading this all over social media." I sighed. "He's still playing the victim, huh? You need to speak up. You can't just let him smear your name." I paused, taking a moment to think. Then I spoke slowly. "I don't need to defend myself. The truth will come out eventually. I don't need to prove anything to him or anyone." I posted a simple message that afternoon. It wasn't a rant, wasn't a defense. Just one line. "The truth speaks louder than any lie." It was enough. A few weeks later, Malik's social media presence had imploded. The lies he'd spread had been exposed one by one, and the backlash was swift. Friends, colleagues, even some family members started distancing themselves. They were beginning to see him for what he was: a liar, a manipulator, someone who was desperate for control but had lost it all. And then, just as things were looking up for me, Vanessa's world began to fall apart too. Her marriage crumbled under the weight of the affair. Her husband found out about her involvement with Malik, and the fallout was brutal. They weren't just separating, they were headed straight for a nasty divorce. I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. Malik had destroyed his life, and he'd dragged her down with him. But it wasn't just her downfall. Malik had been trying to manipulate both of us, like we were pawns in his game, but it was all coming back on him. Vanessa's employer even launched an investigation into her, exposing her own misconduct, financial fraud related to company expenses. She was placed on leave, and soon after, fired. I never wanted any of this. But sometimes, the truth has a way of catching up with you. Eventually, the noise died down. Malik vanished from the public eye, his reputation in tatters. His once confident, brash attitude was replaced with desperation. I heard from a mutual friend that he was living on the couch of some distant relative, scraping by with odd jobs. But none of that mattered to me anymore. My life had shifted into something new, something I had built on my own terms. I had moved into a bright new apartment, one that smelled of new beginnings. The job I had been hoping for materialized, and with it a new sense of freedom. I had come out the other side stronger, more independent, and more confident than I ever thought possible. I even started dating again, cautiously, but with someone who respected me and treated me like I deserved. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who cried herself to sleep for months, unsure of where things were headed. That woman had been afraid, but now I knew better. I wasn't afraid anymore. Malik wanted everything: money, power, control, and he lost it all. What he couldn't take from me was my freedom, and I'd never let anyone take that again. I had my life back, and that was more than enough. Thank you for watching. Please like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this.